Jeremiah was umming before we started to calm himself down. This is the Beyond the Dojo podcast. I'm Lauren.
I'm Jeremiah.
And a few weeks ago, I guess it's about a month ago now, we had I think our largest exam we've ever had. Yeah. And this is rare, but the way that we do exams is we actually ask students to test. The way that it went when I was growing up is it was a free-for-all, and everybody could just show up and test. So you might show up to test, but you're not ready. But we try to, cut that out and make sure that students are ready before they come and test. And we did have to fail 3 people? Two people. And you want to talk about your interaction with Katie?
Oh, yeah. We got and it's going to sound so, I'm biased, yeah. We got some of the most compassionate kids I've ever met in my life. Yeah. She is training with one of the students that didn't pass, and she started crying.
After the exam was over.
After the exam was over, because she realized that she didn't pass, and she was, I had to sit there and tell her, hey, that's what happens when you don't put the work in.
Yeah.
You don't get to that standard. You goof off in class. You might be able to do the movements, but then when you get under pressure, you can't perform. Mm-hmm. So you could fake it in class, but it eventually will show up. I said, right. I told her I really appreciate the fact that she's a compassionate human being.
It was the sweetest thing. I've never seen that happen before. I mean, I'm like, girls, don't cry on the dojo floor, please. Like, stop doing that. But it was really sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, and, it's just a reflection of the community we're part of.
Yeah.
Not only not the dojo community, but also, the surrounding area and everything in this area. That's one of the things I really like about the area we're in is that, it's slowed down enough to where people care about each other.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's not... I mean, you could go an hour south, an hour east from us, and it's big city. No one really knows each other. Mm-hmm. They're only concerned about themselves, and I think it's like that around here.
I think in a lot of cases, though, with kids, I think no matter where they are, a lot of them are still going to have that compassionate attitude. I don't think they've been tainted yet.
It's beyond the kids too, though.
Right.
So talking about the community. So
right. So we received kind of a really big question about essentially how we have run our dojo, how we've made it as successful. Successful is is subjective, but how we've built it to where it is. And we've touched on lots of different aspects of us running our dojo over all of our podcast episodes, but we're actually going to take a couple of episodes and really dive into some of the more nitty-gritty details of how we actually got it started and how we've maintained the dojo. So this episode, we're going to talk about essentially how we got our dojo started. So the first thing to know, if you haven't followed us for a long time, is originally we actually had 2 separate dojos. Yeah. So Jeremiah had a dojo about an hour north of where we live now, and then I inherited a dojo down here. So do you want to talk a little bit about how your dojo kind of got started? Or how you took it over and stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, not like the dramatics, but...
It's unfortunate. Sometimes people just get burnt out of teaching karate. Yeah. And being committed to a dojo. Because it's a lot. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of your energy if you want it done right. Mm-hmm. If you want to be that kind of sensei that has impacts on people's lives. And, not to say it was perfect or anything like that, but... people get burnt out, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I ended up having taking over a dojo. Was the other gentleman was pretty burnt out of doing it and been doing it for a long time, and he was just ready to step away. Mm-hmm. At least that was my understanding at that time. Yeah. So I took over it. I rented another facility. I took in. We just kind of went from there.
How did you guys? So whenever you first walked into the dojo, somebody else was kind of running it. And you ended up kind of coming alongside him and helping teach and stuff, right?
Yeah, basically. So the gist of the story is the dojo in Ocala was run with the gentleman I ran it with and another gentleman. And he just was getting tired of it. Right. And didn't like the situation, didn't like, a lot of things, and decided to step away. So me and a couple other guys, told him, hey, we're really not willing to train with this other guy. We're going to do our own thing. Would you want to be part of us?
Oh, okay.
He said, no problem. And, we jumped on board, we worked everything out. Funny thing was, my name was in all the leases. My name was on the, all the official documents. I did the majority of that. So I feel like there was a point there that it kind of, in hindsight, I felt like that was deliberate to where he could just walk away whenever he wanted to. He had no real liability or connection there. And then, we stepped away from the other gentleman, and we were doing our own thing. Majority of the old dojo came with us.
So when you guys got started, how many students did you have?
15.
And then how did you decide where to go?
So where we were located was pretty centralized in the town we were at. And we just went to different places and looked at different, rental properties. And the couple things that we knew we wanted was that we wanted to be in a strip mall kind of near a main road. We wanted to have a high traffic thing. We wanted to have, we wanted the facility to have AC, have a nice bathroom, enough room to train, some exposure to a main road. And then we wanted it to have enough parking and enough area that so if, parents came to pick their kids up early, they could park in the parking lot and not have to worry about traffic and stuff like that. And the place we found was a shopping area that had its own parking lot, plenty of space for people to park. It had a coffee shop there, had a couple other things. Yeah. So it was a nice place to just kind of, where it wasn't going to be, the traffic wasn't going to be so heavy that it'd be a danger to come in and out.
Did you guys look outside of that city, or did you only look in the city you were already in?
Well, with the established dojo being there, we basically looked in the area that we were at because the majority of the students were from that localized area. We didn't have a lot of reach across town or anything like that. It was literally just in that area. So we kept it that way. A lot of the students were homeschooled and was part of like homeschooled groups, and that group was localized in that area also. So we try to stay as close as possible and kind of maintain that connection.
Yeah. Maybe we can get into the student body a little bit in just a minute too. That way we kind of break that down. So with mine, my situation was not exactly the same, but pretty similar. I grew up in this dojo, and it got to the point where the owner was kind of slowly stepping away, which he had been for a number of years, involving other instructors. And then in 2015, I started managing. So that was one of the advantages. Keep in mind that there were already existing dojos when we stepped in, and it seems like in a lot of cases in the States, depending on where you are, often there are already students in the area. Shotokan's a pretty widespread art in Florida, particularly in certain areas. So sometimes it's easy to step into a student body that already exists. But we had a dojo that was running. I started managing it. I made a lot of changes, to the schedule and the layout of things, and I think doubled the size of the dojo. It was actually very difficult. And, there came a point where the owner, wanted to retire. We couldn't come to an agreement as far as me purchasing the actual building. And there were some drawbacks to the location and the layout of the building, even though it's the building that I had grown up doing karate in. We had been in the same building for like 25 years. I hadn't done karate for 25 years, but we'd been in the same spot all that time. But the building used to be a mechanic shop, and there was a big dividing wall around. Will you stop? The cat's messing with stuff. There's a big dividing wall down the center of the building, and there were only 2 doorways where parents could actually see through. So it was, and the lobby was separate from the training area. So there was the training area, and then there was a warm-up area with the bathroom. The dividing wall separated the 2. There was an office, and then there was the lobby. So it was really a disjointed layout. So at the time I was I don't see anything wrong with this, but now I'm it was not the best layout for a club. And you can't always choose. You really can't always pick and choose like what you can do. One of the advantages of the layout was that when there were beginner students, they used to actually send those beginner students off the floor, and they would train in the warm-up area. So you'd have actually 2 classes going on at one time, which was was great, because that's how my first day there in 2002, that's exactly what we did. Is we were in a separate room, and then the main dojo had the regular class going on. But overall, there were issues with the structure of the building, and you have to make sure you look for things like this. The actual structure of the building had issues. There was some septic issues. It was just stuff that would have cost us a lot of money. Yeah. So it just got to the point where we were like, okay, we need to start looking at other options. So we looked at a few different buildings. Mm-hmm. One of them we looked at was a really cool building on Main Street. Not a lot of parking. It was right down the road from where I used to do dance as a little girl. And once again, not a lot of parking because it's literally on the main road. It wasn't like the strip mall kind of thing where like Jeremiah had, where they had a parking lot. There's no parking lot. The other downside about that building, if you remember, is that even though the front section, like when you first walk in, it was a neat little area. It used to be a post office, but there were pillars in the building, and they were splitting the floor in half, and pillars are fine, but they were actually in the way. They were so close together, it would have been difficult to train. And I would imagine that with kids running around, they would have smacked into the pillars eventually.
Yeah. I think one of the things when you're looking for a location, a venue to run your schools, there's several things, right? Mm-hmm. You have to look at the structure integrity. Mm-hmm. Like, does the roof leak, literally? Yeah. Does the bathrooms work?
Is the AC working, depending on where you live? Is the AC working?
Is there any kind of like, look on the carpet and see if there's any spots where the roof is leaked down onto the carpet and there's wet spots. Can you function with what is there? Are you going to have to build separators and build rooms off to make it work? All these things that you have to look at, you have to consider as part of your cost, because long gone is those days where you could show up in this dungy old room where you could train and it'd be considered somewhat fashionable. Well, you have to have a presentable, professional area where it's safe for the children to train. It's clean and well lit for everybody to train in, and there's not any issues there.
Yeah, well, we ended up, so when Jeremiah was over in one section of Ocala for a while, and then we ended up moving because they changed the rent. So you want to talk about how we got the warehouse set up? Yeah, so that's the warehouse to me was a step down, and then after a while it was obvious that it was not the right decision. The problem was the original dojo, we walked in and it was close to $1,000 a month, or it was $750 a month for the first 4 or 5 years. But the people that owned the plaza sold it to another company, a management company out of New York, and they immediately raised it up to $950. I was having a hard time making $750. I would make it every month, but I'd only have like maybe $100 to $200 overall over that, and that covered my utilities. I have, in the town that I was in, I was having a hard time getting past a certain number of students. I topped off at 15 students, no matter what. I couldn't get past that number. And looking back, there's a lot of things I could have done differently that would have made that more feasible. Mm-hmm. But when they raised the rent, there was no way I was going to be able to pay for it all the time. And so I had to make the decision to move. So when I moved to another facility that was affordable for me, but it was more of a warehouse setup. Yeah. And when I did that, I tried to make it as welcoming and as professional and well lit and everything else. But in Florida, there's certain things you have to have. I had bought a window or door unit and I mounted in the back door to like a 14,000 BTU unit. It's huge. Yeah.
To cool the area off, and it did a decent job, but it was still loud. It's still, it was a warehouse, so it wasn't like this nice, strip mall atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the students, I felt like it limited me getting new students. Like my students that I had were still coming and had no problem with it. It was the appeal to new students, new parents. They just didn't like the atmosphere. I could respect it completely. It's not like they were snooty about it. It was just, it wasn't the greatest location and it wasn't the greatest building. Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of flair to it.
I think too, if your student body like maybe had been different, like I think if it was maybe teens or adults, that would be different. Because right up the block from you was an MMA group, but their clientele were completely different.
Yeah,
I think
different
they did matter
different
to them.
demographic completely.
Yeah,
and that's the thing too. Is like if you have an established demographic, you need to cater to them because that's who's coming who's building your dojo.
Yeah.
You can't switch your demographic and think it's going to be fine. You have to cater to those people.
Mm-hmm.
And my demographic in the town was, I had a lot of homeschool students. I had a lot of kids and preteens, and a lot of families. I maybe had 3 adults at the time, maybe on occasion. So I should have made the decision to find either a smaller space that I can afford and a nicer area, or just bit the bullet and stayed where I was at and just try to hustle to get more.
That was gonna be tough.
More students in, but that risk wasn't worth it to me. You know what I mean? At that time, it just wasn't worth it to me.
Yeah.
So I made the decision to go to a different venue, and it bit me in the butt. It was definitely the first nail in the coffin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was also a little bit further south.
It was a little
which
further
I think was
south.
more difficult for some of the students.
It was a little further south. It wasn't in the same affluent area that we originally had the dojo, so it wasn't like horrible, but it wasn't at the same kind of feel to it. And I think that kind of turned a lot of the people that were coming to see us away from it.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is what it is in the sense of like learning lessons, but it definitely has a big effect. I can always tell the guys that I talk to, they're trying to build dojos, is make sure you're in a good facility.
Yeah.
Make sure that facility suits your culture or your dojo. Like what do you want? What kind of brand of dojo do you want? Are you looking to have a bunch of kids? Are you looking to have more of a mature dojo? Is it going to be based on like, are you going to be like an after school kind of, activities place, or are you going to be a traditional dojo? There's a lot of things you have to really consider who and what you are as a dojo owner.
Even when you pick a building.
Because that right there can change everything. I mean,
and it changes too what you can charge. Like the second building that we looked at that we were seriously considering for ours. I mean, I put a lot of time into this. I brought in like 8 different contractors to look at this building because it was a building from 1955. It used to be a grocery store, and it had 13 parking spots. So that's an okay amount, but not a lot if you're switching classes. It was right in the middle of downtown. It was actually just across the street and railroad track from the previous building that I had looked at. The ceilings were caving in. All of the electrical wiring had to be redone. The AC unit had to be serviced, and an additional unit was going to have to be added. It was on the ceiling. There were serious issues with this building, and they wanted a fortune for it. And I'm not going to get into the issues I ran into with this realtor, but it was going to cost probably $65,000 to renovate this building by the time we got done. So when you choose a building, and if it's not something that's rentable, if you were going to own it, you have to consider the amount of money that you're putting in, not just what you have available, but then that is going to have a trickle-down effect on your demographic, because how much can you charge? How much are you going to have to charge your students?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, that to me, that would have been a huge mistake. I didn't know it at the time. There was also going to be the aspect of we were literally right in front of the train tracks. Right in front of them. I mean, that in and of itself would have been dangerous and also very loud and annoying.
Very loud. And it goes both ways too. So if you were getting into a more affluent part of town where rent's a little bit higher, but it's a nicer place and it's worth that the feel, and it meets your demographic, you have to charge enough to make sure that you cover your bills.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're getting into a building that's way cheaper and it's not in the greatest spot, but it'll work, you need to be fair about your pricing then too.
Or have an exit plan for like, how are you going to build this here while it's cheap to get to somewhere that's better?
Exactly. But be fair about your pricing, because people look at your price, monthly price or membership price, and they go, okay. And then they're not dumb. They're going to look at the building and go, oh, I know how much that's going to rent for. And then they go, okay.
They might know.
But... Well, they could guesstimate, right? And they could be like, all right, this guy's trying to make a killing off of everybody.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's one of those things where being fair about your pricing needs to reflect the building and the venue you're in.
And I think the two things that are going to be the first decisions for most customers who have not done a ton of research is going to be, what does the building look like? Where's the location? And what are your prices? That's going to be the first two things that they look at. They may look at your prices first or your building first, but either one, they're going to look at one of those, and one of those is going to dictate whether or not they bother to look at the other, and then from there, whether or not they bother to pursue a membership.
Right. And the building, when we say the building, we're talking about not only the layout, location, accessibility, the normal amenities, but how clean it is.
Right.
You know, if they walk in and the floor's got dust bunnies on it, the bathroom is horrible.
Well, that's you not cleaning. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's part of it. You have to make sure that what you're selling is the full package, not just, you know, oh, I got this great place and everything, and then you walk in the bathroom and it's disgusting.
Yeah. Nope.
Nobody wants to bring their kid.
That was literally the problem at our old building, is that kids were trying to go to the bathroom. There was something wrong with the toilet. The owner thought that it was the septic. It actually was the toilet itself. Like, I needed a seal replaced. I didn't know anything about plumbing, but it was flooding the bathroom all the time. The bathroom was disgusting. And I'm like, we can't work here. This is nasty.
And you got to be, you know, you have to look at everything, right? You have to be, you have to have a critical eye before you sign those papers.
Yeah.
Especially if you're renting, because, you know, sometimes you'll sign a paper and the agreement's a couple of years. It's not just a yearly agreement. You're talking about a couple of years in a row.
Yeah.
You know, that you're committed to it.
Yeah.
You're committed to making it look right and do it right.
Yeah. So the blessing that we got was, while we were looking for replacement or a new building for the dojo that I was taking over, I had some personal training clients who worked for a vet clinic, and they had just built a new building, and they said, hey, we talked to the owner. He would be willing to rent you this building. You would just have to knock some walls down to turn it into a dojo. I was like, very hesitant. Jeremiah was like, no, we need to do this. And I was like, I don't know. But we agreed to it. And he did give us really low rent. He's been amazing. But this was one of those situations where it is a standalone building. It is not in a strip mall. Yep. And we had to bust our butts to renovate this. So if you have any kind of construction skills, that is always going to be a plus, because it opens up your options as to what you can actually handle without costing you a fortune. Yeah,
and the facility we're in now, I mean, the dojo floor is not the biggest, but it's enough for where we could function. Yeah. And it was the ability. Well, the good thing about the facility was this: they had like 6 or 7 different little rooms where they would bring. I don't know what they're called.
They had exam rooms, like rooms for the animals and stuff, and yeah.
And they were, you know, all separated. There was 3 different bathrooms in the facility at the time. And what we did is we took them all down. We took all the separators down. We took all the walls down. We opened up the main room, and it became this thing we could work with, right?
Right.
But at the same time, we were pretty frugal about it. When we took the walls down, we saved all the lumber, pulled all the nails out of it, and we used that to do the floor. We used it to do anything we needed. We tried to keep as much material where we could recycle it, right, and save money in the long run. And you know, some people might turn their nose up to that, but that's going to make the difference of how you price your classes out, how you run your business, how difficult it is to maintain or get your dojo on going. You know what I mean?
And if you have a lot of money at your disposal, this is neither here nor there. To be honest with you, at the time, I couldn't get a loan because I had quit my job. So I couldn't get any extra money. I had to use whatever I had. But if you have the disposable income, that part of it might not be as much of an issue for you.
Right. And we were fortunate enough to have a really good friend that was willing to help us. And, you know, karate people are kind of funny like that, man, you know? If you have a group of guys that want to train, they're willing to share the work. You know, it's kind of a thing. Every dojo I've ever been to that wasn't a city ran dojo that's what everybody did. You know, the dojo needed painting. We just had a paint party one weekend, and we had everybody in, and we'd paint the walls, or we had to resand the floor. We did that. It was up north. It was nothing to show up and to do that. But you know, the dojo owners took care of the people that showed up. I mean, lunch was nice. You know, they really were very grateful for it. But, you know, figuring out how to make things work you have to take your personal pride and set it aside and say, this is what I can and cannot do.
Right.
And be realistic with yourself, because how much you invest, how much overhead you have is going to make the biggest difference in how long you can run your dojo.
Right.
Because building a dojo from scratch, it takes a while.
Yeah, and
you
that's
got to get your name out. You got to get a student base out. Then you got to kind of like continue to push that, right? Mm-hmm. Lauren and I were very fortunate to take over dojos in the aspect that we had enough students to kind of cover certain things. Mm-hmm. But the reality is this: it was very difficult to build past certain areas, and to build up a student base that was healthy enough to maintain year round.
Yeah. I just want to make a couple more comments about the building, because I think this is important.
Yeah.
One thing I did not like about your previous location is that in order to enter the building, you had to walk across the dojo floor to get to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So you can't always help that. But if possible, it's nice to have the ability to either like have a lobby or have a separate section where people can change and get dressed and get ready without it interrupting your current class. So that was one of the great things about, even our old dojo was like that. The new dojo is great because you first walk in, there's a lobby, the bathroom is, further down the hall, it's separate from the main floor, and then even further down the hall, we have a room that we use for training and massage because we have multiple businesses running out of our dojo. Another thing, if you can leverage your space, do so.
Absolutely.
So when you're considering a dojo space, you need to be looking ahead, not only like, what's the layout of the floor? Is it too narrow? Is it too wide? Do we have to walk immediately onto the floor? Can we access the bathroom? Those questions are important. But then there's also, how can this space be used by other people? Is this space too dingy for other business people to want to come in here and use it? Are you going to contract it out? Are you going to sublease? Do I have other skills? Can I use this space for more than one thing? All of those things are important to consider. And sometimes you can make things work. Like we actually have we actually put a small storage shed out the back side of our building. So technically, if I didn't have the training space, I could store things in the storage shed and bring it in and always train people, on the off hours on the main floor. Luckily, we don't have that issue because we've got an extra space attached to the building. But those are considerations as well as like if I'm considering like my overall like profit and all of that kind of stuff, what I'm having to charge for my students. Am I trying to make money off of this? Is this just a hobby? All of those are important factors to consider with the building, how much rent you're paying, how much money you have to put into it, the layout of the building, all of that kind of stuff you need to think about.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And don't be in a rush.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in such a time slot where you have to get something right away. Mm-hmm. Shop. Yeah. Do your due diligence. Look into the surrounding area. See what kind of neighborhood you're moving into. See what's the predominant demographic, right? Rick, we talk about Rick all the time. Rick runs a adult only dojo, right? But if you look at the surrounding areas, that's predominantly what's going on there. There's not a lot of children's activities. This is an adult kind of room area, and he does fine. He has plenty of people in the class. There's enough. He does fine. Right. He does well for himself, and that's fine too. Yeah. Right. You got to know what you want to be, what your dojo wants to be,
and what you want out of it.
And what you want out of it. We're talking from like a professional kind of dojo where we're offering classes to all spectrum of people. Mm-hmm. And that's not, to say we're trying to be this mega business. It's just that's what we had to do because that's what we know will work in the area we're in. Sure. Right? And that's the thing. It's like know your area, know your brand, know what you want, and then kind of shop around. Don't be eager to jump into something because you'll be committed to it. You might end up paying for something that stays empty.
And there are some people who some people run clubs out of like YMCA's. We just trained at a dojo with a club a couple weeks ago. They train out of an LA Fitness, out of a yoga studio, basically. Yeah. So if you can find somebody else who has a studio and you can rent from them, that's awesome as well because you don't have all of that liability of the building and all of the maintenance and all of that kind of stuff.
I will say this though, if you go to a YMCA or anything like that, don't be surprised that they're like, no, we don't want that here. because it's not personal. It's a liability thing. Because what happens if they offer that class, they're the ones responsible for the liability, not you. You essentially become like either an independent contractor or an employee of that facility. And that's something they have to consider. So don't be offended if someone's like, no, we're not going to do that. Well, it might just be a policy of that, of the YMCA or whatever.
Yeah. And two, like the YMCA that you looked into in Ocala, that was like, I have an existing club, I'm taking money. The guys that we just trained with in Jacksonville, they don't, as far as I can tell, they don't pay any membership fees. Right. And they also cannot build their dojo and accept students. It's just guys training together.
They're members of the LA Fitness. They pay their membership fees to them. Right. And they just happen to meet together and are allowed to use the yoga room once a week. Right. They're not allowed to promote themselves. They're not allowed to create classes. They're not allowed to take in students. Right.
So if you wanted that and you just wanted somebody to train with, those are options as well. Because like we said, there's lots of guys, or women too, around in different places that don't have anywhere to train. So if you just wanted to bring people together, that's another option.
Yep. So it goes back to, what is your brand? What do you want out of it? What is your goals? And then stick to it. Yeah. Like Lauren said, it's not a bad idea to go to yoga studios, dance studios, stuff like that. Yeah. That already have a facility that will work with you. I know the JK Club in Orlando. They worked out of a dance studio for a long time.
They're in one right now.
They're in one right now, and it's perfect. Right. So.
Yeah, and so you've talked a little bit about like student body. Yeah. So once you get the building kind of squared away, there are some considerations like as far as how do you build your student body, and I do think, like you mentioned, it's going to be very dependent on where you are, and also how connected you are to that community. If I can say this, I think one of the advantages our dojo that's closer to home has had over the dojo that Jeremiah had in Ocala is that we live here. Right. So a lot of our students are either word of mouth, it's because we know them, we know their families, whatever. We also are the only dojo like around at all. So that helps too, versus where Jeremiah was, he didn't live there. There are lots of other dojos. There may be some word of mouth, but the way that he had to get students there versus how we have gone about getting students here is not the same.
Yeah. And on that base, that part of it too is, you could do it all by yourself. I did it for 7 years by myself with no help, but I hit the ceiling. I hit a ceiling with a certain number of students because I couldn't do much more beyond that. Right. I would encourage you to have either a partner or someone you trust that's willing to take some of the classes and teach them also. Even if it's just like, hey, a group of black belts that are willing to teach. Everybody else teaches maybe one class a week, and you teach the main majority of them. Yeah. It gives you opportunity to not burn yourself out. It gives the dojo a different variety of teachers and verbiage and teaching styles that it could really benefit the dojo overall.
And if you're concerned, like I know that there are some people who are, and we talk about this sometimes too, if you're concerned that, maybe these guys that are in your dojo, maybe you don't all have the same background, maybe you don't agree on everything that you're training, because that's common too. Continuously training together allows you to have more open communication and allows you to kind of come together on the same page about what should be taught. I think there's a lot of ego in karate, but there's also a lot of humility, and I think a lot of people are open to accepting that your views might be different than the head sensei. If you're the person running the dojo, you're the head sensei. So they may be more willing to adhere to your teaching if you guys are, having open communication about things, having classes together, sharing ideas, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things is continue training. Don't become a teacher and just teach, because then you're not going to have any new information as your students progress. You're going to be stuck at a certain level, and they're going to meet you there, and you're going to have nothing to offer them. Continuously train on your own with other people, have influences from other senseis, have a discerning mind in a sense, be critical about what's going on, and obviously, hopefully you have a passion for karate, because you want to open a dojo. So feed your own passion, right? Until there's other rewards that the dojo create. Continue to feed your own passion.
Yeah.
I think that one of the best things I did in Ocala was the fact that even though the dojo was breaking even, where I didn't have to pay any rent out of my own pocket or utilities out of my pocket, I had people come to my dojo a lot. Mm-hmm. And that was my reward. Mm-hmm. I had people to train with. I had a facility that was available for me to do what I needed to do when I wanted to.
Yeah.
And that kept me going. Mm-hmm. So, anything to keep your passion alive for the art is a positive thing when you're a dojo owner.
Yeah. So let's spit off of some ideas for getting students, just kind of like quick fire here.
Quick fire?
Yeah, so ideas for getting students. One idea is posting, this used to be easier than it is now, but posting ads in local Facebook groups, particularly yard sale groups. Like I said, that's more difficult to do now, but posting ads in Facebook groups is one idea.
Buying a, I don't know what they're called, going to festivals and having a spot.
Oh, a booth.
Huh?
A booth.
A booth, yeah. Getting a booth at festivals, local, anything kind of local where you could get your name out, get people connected. Don't be afraid to be a little silly there, right? Mm-hmm. So what we did at our local events is we took pool noodles and challenged people to sword fights.
They're lightsabers.
Lifesavers, right? But what was cool about that is the
kids
kids lit up and they would want to do it. And we had, if we had students with us, we'd let them do it, right? But it gave us an opportunity not only to connect with the kids or potential students, but also connect to the parents and be like, hey, this is what we're about.
We also did it, like most festival games you have to pay for them.
We did it for
We
free.
didn't charge. We did it for free. Just like, hey, let me come over here. We'll beat you up real quick. But I think that was a good way to, it was a good foot to get off on with parents as far as advertising.
Right. Volunteer. Network in your neighborhood or network in your city. Mm-hmm. Start to get some business connections and stuff like that, because you never know who's looking to have their children or themselves do karate. Try to network a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Doing, if you can, doing, oh man, are we running out of, I think we're running out of.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Oh no, I wonder if we ran out of space on our thing. Okay, we may have run out of space on our camera. Anyway.
Yeah, we're professionals here.
Yeah, we're professionals.
Look how red
I was
she's
like,
turning.
why is it? I was
Lauren's
like, why is
turning
it
so
flashing? Okay. So another one is depending on the type of people that you want in your dojo. I mean, even if you're not necessarily trying to attract adults, doing self-defense seminars. Don't do self-defense seminars if you don't understand self-defense. Oh God, please don't.
Teach what you know.
But running some kind of like short-term seminar, like a one-time class, public class, whatever, either in your dojo or in a public arena, those are always great ideas also.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if you're part of another organization, say you're part of the Moose, whatever, Moose Lodge, or you're a Freemason.
Like, what karate organizations
well, no,
got
I'm just saying
in it?
I'm saying like the Moose Lodge, the Freemasons, if you're part of a church.
Okay. Leveraging it. Yeah, there's no more. It's okay. Memory card's dead. So, like, yeah, if you're part of an existing organization.
So keep on it.
Yeah, it's recording on the computer.
Sorry. So if you're part of any other organization that you can network and talk about, and there's nothing wrong with volunteering at church to do something at the VBS.
Right.
Right. I'm not saying turn your church connections into a business connections. What I'm saying is
but talking
volunteering your services at certain events and certain things is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So here's another idea, and this actually comes from lots of different business people, particularly with personal training, but just tell stories about what you do on Facebook. If you have local connections on Facebook, people that you interact with quite a bit, just tell stories about stuff that happens in class. I do this all the time, and I don't really do it to advertise. I do it because it's funny, but I'll share like funny things that happened in some of our classes on my Facebook page. But once again, I'm connected in the community that we're in with people on Facebook, so that is why that works for me, is because I've been doing that way. And the deeper connections you can have locally, the better off you're going to be. I mean, if you're building a student base of people who've never done karate before, you really need to be tied to the community in some way that you're in. It's just like Jeremiah was talking about the Ocala dojo. Like it was gut wrenching, like having to close it, because there got a point where we were like, alternating, him being there and me being here versus at this dojo, and then we would alternate. I would be there and he would be here, and it didn't matter. Like, it felt like no matter what we did, we just couldn't get it to grow, but we weren't part of that community. He wasn't part of that community even before he lived down here, so it was just really tough.
And I would say that since I moved down here full time to the dojo here,
dude, and like Jeremiah didn't grow up here or anything, but people know who he is.
Yeah.
Now,
well, the thing is too, I grew up in, even though I was a military brat, my mom's from rural Japan. She's not a city person. She grew up on a farm. My dad grew up on a farm. We moved to Archer, Florida, which is a small town outside of Gainesville, but it was a farming community. I was able to connect it because it was like just the natural perspective of life, right? I moved down here, and it's the same thing. It's a rural farming community, and it made sense.
Yeah, easy to connect to and stuff.
Easy connection, so.
Yeah. Any other ideas for getting students? I mean, guys, there's lots of different marketing things. I'm sure you can look up things online as far as like marketing, getting students in the door. Signage helps. I would always try to go with the cheapest route first, partially because I'm a cheap person and because I want a return on my investment. So if I'm going to spend money, it had better be worth it. You can try running camps. We did that, hoping that we would get students. That never worked out, so we stopped running camps. We always just ended up running camps for students we already had. So, those are just maybe some thoughts.
Yep, that's about it.
Okay. What you working on?
Man, right now it's just a lot of lately what I've been doing is doing the first 10 kata. Left and right. Just to be balanced in different movements. That's all.
Gotcha.
Been working on that combo still. Just the subtleties. Like for me, the issue I'm having right now is that I tend to lean forward and punch with my shoulders, and I lose my posture and my connection. So I've been working on keeping upright, using my legs and my hips more to move and initiate things. It sounds really basic, but if you think about it, you're constantly fighting that natural urge to kind of lift your shoulder up, and you got to, even though you feel like you have it, you got to be critical.
Yeah.
Think, tape yourself.
Yeah. Definitely.
Watch yourself.
Yeah.
Does not lie. What you working on?
I'll talk about it in the next one. Because we're doing 2 back to back.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I gotta go get a new SD card. But anyhow, thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah.
We're gonna cover some more of this stuff about maintaining your dojo.
And hopefully it's something you guys could use. I mean, we don't have all the answers. We're just sharing the things that we learned from experience. And if we could help someone in some way, it's all good.
We've had our boots on the ground a little bit. Even though it hasn't been like a ton of years each, we just did a lot.
We've made enough mistakes too, though.
Yeah,
right? We know enough that we made enough mistakes to kind of veer you away from certain things. And more dojos that are successful, especially in our local area, the better off we're going to be because it's just a bigger community we can be part of, and that's a cool thing.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, guys, bye.
Bye.